What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the TCO Fantasy Football Show. Whoop! Ladies and gentlemen, I'm on spring break, so I'm wearing a little festive attire. I know it looks a little funny, and if you want to talk about it, you should talk about it down in the comments. Leave some comments. On today's episode, we're going to be going over my 8 through 12 for my rookie rankings. Yes, we are continuing the rookie rankings. And quick announcement, this upcoming Thursday is the NFL Combine. And so if you want to see these guys in action, running routes, running 40s, high jumping it, go watch the NFL Combine. It's going to be on NFL Network. I know it sounds like I'm sponsoring NFL Network, but it's going to be on NFL Network on Thursday. And, well, Thursday's the quarterbacks, wide receivers, and tight ends. And Friday's going to be the running backs and O-linemen. Saturday and Sunday are defensive guys. We don't really care about them for fantasy football purposes. And that's about it. That was my only announcement. So, yeah. So let's get right into today's episode. So my first guy I am talking about today is somebody I have talked about before. It's David Bell. He is a 6'2" wide receiver, 205 pounds, played for Purdue, the Boilermakers. Didn't even know they were called the Boilermakers. And this past season he had 93 catches, 1,286 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 13.8 yards per catch. Great stat I love about David Bell is the fact that he has averaged over 100 yards per game over the past 2 years. In 2020, he had 53 catches, 625 yards, 11.8 yards per catch, and 8 touchdowns. I know that number doesn't make much sense with the 100 yards I was just saying, but it's because that season was cut short because of COVID, obviously. And in 2019, he had 86 catches, 1,035 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And so his worst year, his rookie or freshman year, he averaged 86 yards, I think it was. Yes, 86 yards per game, and that's still pretty darn good. And that's one big thing I really like about him. A lot of people really haven't been talking about him that much, or weren't talking about him that much in the past, because he played with Rondale Moore, and Rondale Moore was the big flashy guy, and David Bell was the guy who got all the receptions and all the yards, and wasn't as flashy. But I really, really like David Bell. I'm super excited for him. I made 2 videos about him now because this is my second time talking about him. And he's awesome. He's awesome. I actually just traded, well, not just, it was a couple weeks ago now, but I traded a couple players so I could get a pick to possibly get him. Yes, that's how much I like him. And the biggest problem with him is the fact that a team might not use like really high draft capital on him because he's not a flashy guy. He's not your Garrett Wilson. He's not Drake London or Treylon Burks. He's just David Bell. I think a really good comparison for him is like a Keenan Allen type of wide receiver, somebody who isn't really fast, but they really know how to run very good routes, and that is what makes their game really good. And so I feel like if David Bell falls into one of those same type of situations, kind of like Keenan Allen did, he can be a really good wide receiver. He'll never be that guy who's going to finish as a top 5, number 1 guy, but he could definitely be a top 10 who puts up 12, 13 points a game for your team consistently. And with me, I love consistency. That is one of my favorite things, and I think David Bell is the guy who could do that. And so he is my number 8 guy in my rankings. Ooh, that was a bad voice crack. Alrighty, so my 109 is a running back. He plays for Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish. It is Kyron Williams. Oh yeah, Kyron Williams is a 5'9", 199-pound running back. This past season he had 204 attempts, 1,002 yards, 14 touchdowns, and 4.9 yards per carry. 2020, he had 211 carries, 1,125 yards, and 13 touchdowns with 5.3 yards per carry. So actually, a little bit better stats in 2020. But doesn't matter. He's a good running back. He's a good running back. That's kind of all I have to say, to be quite honest. I have such a hard time ranking running backs because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good they are. Their talent does not matter at all. It only matters where they end up. Like, Isaiah Spiller and Breece Hall could end up in horrible situations. They could end up on teams that aren't good, where they're like the 1-2. And Kyron Williams could end up in the situation where he's the clear RB1 for a team. And so there's just that little issue with ranking running backs. But nonetheless, Kyron Williams is a running back who runs very hard. He reminds me a lot of James Conner and a little bit of James White too, because he has that high-end receiving upside. Oh yes, that is one good thing I do really like about him. He has the receiving upside that a lot of backs don't usually have, that we want for fantasy football. But he's a tiny dude. He's 5'9", 199 pounds, so a little bit smaller than the average running back. But I don't know what much more to say about him. He's really hard to rank just because he's talented. He's very talented. But if he doesn't end up in a good situation, how's he ever going to be good? And so that's the big issue with ranking running backs. But I have him at 109 right now. But there's a high possibility we move him up. Maybe he ends up in a really good situation. Maybe he goes to he's going to probably be a second-round pick. Maybe even an early third, which would kind of suck. I hope he's a second-round pick. But if he's an early third, he's going to probably fall a little farther back in my rankings. But if he's a second-rounder, he might move up. Might move up into the top 5, to be quite honest, if he gets into the right situation. And so there really isn't much more to say about him. He can pass protect. And he could be a 3-down back if he got into the right situation. And the big problem with running backs is that it all kind of depends on their situation. So I like him. Got him at 109. And he can definitely go a little higher. 100%. So he's my 109. So my 110 in my rankings is a wide receiver. He played for Ohio State for 4 seasons, actually. So he's a little bit of an old man. It is Chris Olave. Oh yeah, played for the Buckeyes. He is a 6'1", 189-pound receiver. I do not believe he's 6'1". I do not believe this guy is an inch taller than Garrett Wilson. So I'm really excited for the combine on Thursday so I can see how tall this guy actually is, because we're going to get some accurate measurements. And I just don't believe he's 6'1". But that's what ESPN says, and we got to trust ESPN because it's ESPN. So, in 2021, he had 65 catches, 936 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 14.4 yards per catch. 2020, he had 50 catches, 729 yards, 14.6 yards per catch, and 7 touchdowns. Now, the weird part about Chris Olave is that in 2020, he was a junior. And so everybody thought, okay, Chris Olave is going to go to the draft. And he didn't. He didn't. And that season, he actually ended up leading the team in yards. So it was him, Garrett Wilson, Jameson Williams. Now, 2021 comes around, and everybody's thinking, okay, Chris Olave is going to be the number 1 guy. He's going to be great. He's going to look really good. His draft stock's going to go up. But it actually ended up being kind of the opposite of that. You see, Jackson Smith-Njigba came in, took over, and then Garrett Wilson took another step and moved into the number 2 spot. And now Chris Olave is the number 3, almost like Jameson Williams was a couple years ago. But nonetheless, he still put up 900 yards. And maybe it's just that talented of a wide receiver room where Chris Olave is your number 3 option. But I really like him. He is an excellent route runner. He is going to be really good. I think he's going to be good. People have him going as a late first-round pick, maybe a mid-first-round pick at the best. And I've seen him going to places like the Chiefs, which I love. Whatever wide receiver goes to the Chiefs, which everybody has them projected to take a wide receiver at the end of the first. Don't know why, but they do. And if they do, whatever guy that is, I'm going to take that guy. That guy is going to be good. But they also have him projected going to the Packers, which scares me a tad bit because I don't really like Jordan Love that much. But he could definitely be a really good guy, but I just never see Chris Olave becoming a number 1 option anywhere. I see him being a really good number 2. He is a great guy to back up a big man. He could be, I think the best thing he could ever be is a high-end wide receiver too. And that's my personal opinion. But some good comparisons. I think a really good comparison is Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb was always a wide receiver who was never the number 1 option on the Packers, but he was always that guy who was there and got it done at the end of the day. And he never finished as a really high guy, but he finished right in the middle, which is good. It's good. At the value you're getting him, that'll be good. And I like him. I like Chris Olave. I like him a lot. I never see him being a number 1, ever. Maybe he will, but I doubt it. And the only issue with him is what I said. He fell to number 3 on the Ohio State, and he's a little bit older. He is a tad bit older than other wide receivers. He's going to be 22 when he enters the league. turns 22 in June, and there really isn't any problems with him. I think you can get him at 110. You got a good pick. You got a really good value pick with him. And if he gets into a good situation like the Chiefs, I could definitely see some room for him to move up in my rankings. But right now, I got him as the 110. Oh, what's that I hear? Oh, you went to your Dynasty Fantasy Football Championship and you lost, and now you're sitting there with the 111 and you're thinking to yourself, ugh, this is a horrible pick. What am I going to do with the 111? I got a team that needs one little piece to make a playoff push, and I just don't know what to do at 111. I'm going to tell you what to do. Take George Pickens. George Pickens was supposed to be the best wide receiver in this draft class before he tore his ACL. He is a 6'3", 200-pound wide receiver, played for the Georgia Bulldogs, and this past season, he only had 5 catches and 107 yards because he tore his ACL. But this was a guy we were looking at in the beginning of the year saying, okay, this guy's clearly the number one option in this whole entire draft class. And if you can steal him at 111, steal him. Take him. Do it. This guy is a dog. There's a video of George Pickens, and let me tell you something. If you don't like him already, watch this video. Google George Pickens shoving the dude, and there's a video of him shoving the absolute, he just shoves this guy, and the guy goes flying. This is a strong 6'3" boy who can be darn good. He is probably the highest upside guy in this entire class, but he is by far the lowest floor by a long shot. And so if you got the 111 and you got a team right now that just made a championship and you got some room to take a little bit of risk, take some risk on George Pickens. Because trust me, it will be worth it. And at 111, it doesn't even matter. It's the 111. Like, you're in the back of the first round. If you're getting any value there, you're a happy guy. And so George Pickens is my 111. I wish I could tell you more about him, but there just isn't, like, the stats don't really talk that much. Like, 2020, he had 36 catches, 513 yards, 6 touchdowns. And 2019, he had 49 catches, 727 yards, and 14.8 yards per catch, and 8 touchdowns. So the stats really don't speak for themselves, but if you go and watch some videos on him, he looks amazing, and he's good. He's darn good. If you get him at 111, you take him at 111 because you do. You just do it. And so, yeah, George Pickens, 111. So my final guy I am talking about today is my 112. He is a wide receiver because you're obviously not getting any good running backs at the back of the first round. He plays for Penn State. It is Jahan Dotson. Oh, yeah. He's a tiny guy. He's 5'11", 184 pounds. And this past season, he had 91 catches, 1,182 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 13 yards per catch. Now, Jahan Dotson is an excellent route runner. This kid looks great in his breaks, looks great coming out of the routes, good hands, can locate the ball, but he's just got nothing cool about him. He's very underwhelming. Very underwhelming. When I look at him, I think a lot about David Bell and earlier in this draft, but David Bell's just a lot better version of him. And Chris Olave is a lot better version of him. He's just very boring. He reminds me a lot of Josh Palmer. I think that's his name. Plays for the Chargers. Drafted him a couple years ago. I don't know. A year ago, maybe? I think his name's Josh Palmer. Not quite sure. I got to fact check me on that one. But he reminds me of a wide receiver who isn't crazy good, and he's probably not even going to end up in a great situation. But if he did, he could play like a Tyler Lockett type of role, and somebody who isn't particularly fast or particularly that good, but has that chemistry with their QB to be really good. And so, Jahan Dotson is not the craziest, flashiest guy by any means, and if you get him, you're not standing there like, woohoo! But if you have the 112, you probably won your fantasy league, so congrats on that part. And if you add a little bit of a good bench option, that's 10 out of 10. It's good. It's nice to have a little bit of depth on your team, and maybe he ends up becoming something. And so, yeah, nothing crazy about Jahan Dotson. I'm not crazy about Jahan Dotson, but He's the 112, so you can't be crazy about a guy you're getting that late. And that about wraps it up for my rookie rankings. But guess what? We're going to do a quick summary real quick. Oh yeah, at the 108, we got David Bell, a guy that I really, really like. Somebody who could definitely turn into a Keenan Allen or somebody of that caliber, and I really like David Bell. 109, we got Kyron Williams, a running back who's good. He's good, I think. If he ends up in a good situation, he's going to be good. If he ends up in a bad situation, he's going to be bad. Simple. To the point. The 110, we got Chris Olave, another really good wide receiver who could get into a really good situation and become a high-end wide receiver too. Never a wide receiver one, in my opinion. Sorry, Chris Olave. The 111, we got somebody who has probably the highest upside in this whole entire draft class, George Pickens. George Pickens is the 6'3" demon who we were talking about being the number one prospect in this class. And if you can get him at 111, you should be a happy guy because he is really, really good. And my 112, my final guy, is Jahan Dotson, a very underwhelming wide receiver who isn't particularly great, but he has good dynamics, good route runner, got good hands, and maybe he figures it out and gets into a good situation like Tyler Lockett did. But that wraps it up. Those are my 12 guys for my rookie rankings, and if you guys want me to go into the second round, I happily will. Please let me know in the comments. The problem with the second round is that there really isn't much talent. I do have a couple sleepers back there, but that's something for another episode. And if you guys want me to talk about that, please leave it down in the comments. And please, people, like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram. Oh, yeah. Follow the Instagram at TCO Fantasy Show. Oh, yes. And another announcement. Saying it once again, watch the Combine on Thursday. It's going to be on NFL Network. We're not sponsored by NFL Network, but watch the Combine. It's going to be really interesting to see these wide receivers in action and see what they got. We're going to see them run some routes. We're going to see some of the quarterbacks out there. And leave down in the comments if you guys want me to talk about those quarterbacks as well, because I didn't talk about any quarterbacks in these rankings because I do one quarterback leagues where we don't really worry about quarterbacks. But if you want me to talk about anything, tell me in the comments, and I will 110% talk about it. That's all I got for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching the TCO Fantasy Football Show. Have a wonderful day, everybody.